You ever know someone whose presence was so quiet, so unassuming, they might as well have been part of the wallpaper? Someone who slipped through the world like a shadow cast in daylight? That was her. Her name was Maya Colton. She sat 2 rows behind my niece in Mr. Ellery's social studies class. I remember my niece saying, "She never talks. She just exists." And in a town like ours, existing while black and quiet was enough to make you a target. Maya was the kind of girl you'd miss if you blinked. Always in oversized sweaters, always a little hunched like she was trying to shrink herself into the folds of her notebook. No makeup, no gossip, just air. She walked the hallways like a ghost trailing the scent of pencil shavings and lonely lunches. Her daddy, folks called him Mr. Colton, was a farmer. One of those proud, weathered men you'd never see in town unless it was for seed, gas, or the post office. Tall, wiry, always wearing his faded army jacket. He'd done 2 tours back in the day, Scout Division. Didn't say much, but when he did, people listened. Thing is, he didn't know what was happening to Maya. How could he? She never told him. None of us knew, not really, until it was too late to unsee what had been done. Let me take you back to the fall of '09. Wind carried that brittle scent of dying leaves and bonfire smoke. School was in full swing. That was the year the whispers started. You know the kind I'm talking about. The kind that slice you up while pretending they're just jokes. It began with small things. No one picking her for projects. Laughter when she answered a question right. Calling her Mule Girl behind her back because of her farm chores. One of them even said she smelled like corn dust. But it got worse. There was a day, one I'll never forget, when I stopped by the school to drop off my nephew's inhaler. I passed the girls' bathroom and heard laughter. Cruel, sharp. Then came Maya's voice, soft and shaking. "Please, just stop." I didn't go in. I still carry that moment. That I didn't step in. Didn't knock. I told myself it wasn't my place. But the truth is, I didn't want to see what I already knew was there. They called her Scarecrow because she was tall and lanky, all elbows and shadows. Someone wrote it on her locker in dry erase marker one day. Took a week before anyone cleaned it off. The school never stepped in. Teachers looked the other way. Principal Hargrove said things like, "Kids will be kids." But when those kids are white, and the quiet girl they're picking on is black, that phrase holds a different kind of weight. And Maya? She kept her head down. She'd come home, do her chores, and smile just enough so her father wouldn't ask questions. But fathers like Mr. Colton, especially men who've seen war, they sense when something isn't right, even if their daughters don't say it. The night he found out? I wasn't there, but I heard it from Miss Alma, our neighbor down the gravel road. Her granddaughter was in Maya's grade. She'd seen the fake Instagram post they made of Maya, mocking her clothes, her accent, her skin. She showed it to Alma, and Alma showed it to Colton. He didn't say a word, just nodded once. Went inside, poured himself a cup of black coffee, and stared out into the field. Maya came home late that day. Saw her father on the porch, still a stone. She didn't ask why he was sitting there. And he didn't ask her anything, either. Just said, "Get some rest, baby." That was the last ordinary moment in our town. Because the next morning, Mr. Colton didn't go to the fields. He went into his old shed. The one he never opened. The one with the lock so rusted, people assumed it hadn't been used since the war. He stayed in there for hours. Maybe days, really. Only came out to eat and stare down at that brown patch of dirt near the tree line like it held secrets. Something had shifted in him. A quiet storm, building. But there was no yelling. No threats. No revenge, not in the way folks expected. He just started, digging. Not with a shovel. With truth. And by the time folks realized what was happening, the truth had already begun to bleed out from every perfect white porch, every polished family name. Because Mr. Colton? He wasn't just a farmer. He was a hunter. And now, he had a new kind of prey. You ever walk past a house and feel like it's hiding something? Like the curtains are too still, the air too clean, the laughter a little too rehearsed? That's how the homes on Cresswell Lane felt. Neatly painted. Lawns trimmed within an inch of their lives. American flags on porches, wind chimes that played Amazing Grace on breezy Sundays. But beneath all that polish, there was rot. And Mr. Colton, he knew exactly where to dig. Now, I wasn't inside that shed, but I seen enough from across the field. I remember the way his porch light burned late into the night. His truck, untouched for days. The mail piling up, still unopened. Something was brewing inside that man. Something cold, methodical. And then, like clockwork, it began. The first ripple hit the Daniels family. Their youngest boy, Kyle, had been one of the ones whispering in the hallways. Always just behind Maya in line. Always loud enough to be cruel, but quiet enough to stay out of trouble. His father, Russ Daniels, ran a roofing company, one of the biggest employers in town. Had a good name, a reputation for honesty and Christian values. Then, out of nowhere, someone filed a complaint to the state labor board. Claimed Russ was misclassifying workers, paying them under the table, skimming payroll taxes. At first, folks said it was nonsense. Until it wasn't. State investigators showed up the next week. Not a whisper of warning. Just black SUVs and men in button-downs asking for files. The whole town saw it. The Daniels' pristine image? Cracked. But it didn't stop there. Next came the Wilcox family. People knew Maggie Wilcox, principal's assistant, always dressed like a Sunday church usher, smile tight as piano wire. Her son, Trent, was one of Maya's tormentors. One of the worst. Thought it was funny to trip her in the hall, then play innocent. Called her background noise. 3 weeks after the Daniels scandal, someone leaked emails from Maggie's school account. Racist stuff. Jokes. Memes. The kind that made your stomach turn. No one knew who got them. But one morning, those emails were printed and taped across the school's main entrance. Every single one. Maggie was suspended pending investigation. She never came back. Still, no one could trace where the leaks came from. The authorities couldn't find fingerprints. No IP address. Nothing stuck. It was like justice was moving in silence. Like a scalpel. And then the town started to whisper. Real quiet. Like the way folks talk after church when a marriage goes cold. You could feel it. Something invisible, but heavy, had settled over the town. Eyes darted in grocery aisles. Conversations stopped when you walked into a room. People were afraid, but they didn't know of what. Only I had an idea, because I saw the man behind it. Mr. Colton. He still hadn't spoken a word about what was happening. He still walked to the market every Friday for flour and beans. Still nodded at the cashier. Still tipped his hat when he passed the church. But his eyes? They weren't the same. They weren't angry. They were exact. And every time he looked out over that cornfield, I knew he wasn't thinking about crops. He was thinking about patterns. Connections. Threads. One night, I got curious. Drove up the road. Parked at the edge of his fence line where the trees start to thicken. Just watched. His shed glowed faintly from a single desk lamp. Inside, I saw walls covered in paper, clippings, photographs, printouts. String lines pinned from name to name. Like something out of those detective movies. He wasn't just collecting dirt. He was building a map. And that's when I realized, this wasn't vengeance. This was an operation. I should have left it alone. Should have driven back home. But curiosity's a hungry thing. Next morning, I found a note slipped under my door. Typed. No name. No address. Just one line. Keep watching. You'll understand. By the time winter came to Sugarfield, the silence in town had grown thick enough to taste. You'd hear it in the diner, where folks used to gather every Sunday after service. No more gossip about high school football. No more laughing over blueberry pie. Just quiet forks and sideways glances. Because by then, it wasn't just a scandal or two. It was a reckoning. And no one knew whose name was next. The next to fall was a woman named Jenna Pike. If you grew up around here, you'd know her face. She ran the town's charity council, organized the food drives, posted scripture verses under her Facebook selfies. Her daughter, Haley, was in Maya's chemistry class. Used to sneak her phone under the desk and take pictures of Maya when she wasn't looking. Snap, whisper, giggle, post. The captions were never outright cruel, but they carried that venom of fake sweetness. Our local orphan Annie, but with less charm. One even said, "Why does she always look like she's afraid of her own skin?" When the pictures resurfaced, no one could prove who took them. But then a video showed up. Not online. Not sent around. It was left on the desk of the school superintendent. A flash drive. No label. Just one file. Pike_daughter confession.mp4. It was a screen recording of a private Snapchat between Haley and another girl. They were laughing, talking about how they messed with Maya's locker, how Haley borrowed the guidance counselor's keys to get access to the school's student database for Maya's address. And there, at the end of the video, was Haley's voice. "My mom says the Coltons should have moved years ago. They're bad for the town image." Boom. Within 48 hours, Jenna Pike was removed from her position to focus on family matters. Their pristine white fence, gone. Ripped out overnight. Someone said their bank froze their accounts after suspicious activity was flagged. Whether it was true or not, they disappeared from church pews and grocery lines. And still, Mr. Colton said nothing. No triumph. No anger. Just that quiet, still stare. I remember one morning, I was walking past his gate, and he was out front with a rake, collecting dead leaves in neat little piles. I nodded, tried to offer a quiet, "Morning, sir." He didn't respond at first. Just kept raking. Then, real soft, he said, "People love glass houses when they think no one's got stones." And that was it. He went back to raking. That's when it hit me. This wasn't a man reacting out of pain. This was a man with a code. A man trained to move in shadows, with precision, with patience. Not for revenge, no. For justice, served so cold it froze you before you knew it was there. Maya still hadn't said anything. She didn't change overnight. Still sat in the back of the class. Still wore her hoodies. Still walked the halls like air. But there was something in her now. A small, steady flame behind the eyes. And here's the thing I'll never forget. One day after school, I saw her waiting on the bench outside the post office. Just sitting, legs crossed, reading a book. The sun hit her hair just right, and for the first time, she looked at peace. Not because the world had changed, but because she knew she wasn't alone anymore. You see, the worst kind of cruelty is the kind that makes you believe you're invisible. But Mr. Colton made sure the town saw. And what he uncovered next? That would turn everything upside down. Now, I gotta be careful with this part. Even all these years later, some names still carry weight in Sugarfield. Some doors still close when you mention the wrong family. But truth has a way of outliving fear, and I've been carrying this story too long to stop now. The sheriff's name was Elwood Grant. Been in office since before I had gray in my beard. Big man with a thick mustache and a handshake that could crush bones. He ran on honor and order, wore that badge like it was carved in stone. Folks respected him, trusted him, or at least, they knew better than to cross him. His son, Carter Grant, was Maya's year. Captain of the baseball team. Smile like a toothpaste commercial. Always the first to stand for the pledge, the last to leave the field. You'd never guess that behind those sparkling blue eyes was the kind of boy who made girls cry behind gym doors. But Maya? She wasn't crying. No, what happened with Carter wasn't physical. It was calculated. He ran the whisper campaign. The lies. The rumors. It started subtle. She cheated on her midterm. She got caught stealing test answers. Her dad's a drunk, probably beats her. Each rumor was planted like seeds in a cracked sidewalk, and Carter? He just watched them grow. And the worst part? He smiled when people asked if it was true. Never confirmed. Never denied. Just enough poison to let it spread. I'd heard the rumors. We all had. But it wasn't until that folded envelope showed up in the mailbox of Principal Harmon that the house of cards started to tremble. Typed on plain white paper. No signature. Just a series of screenshots. Carter Grant's group chats. Not just rumors. Instructions. Telling other boys what to say, how to say it. Suggesting they mess with Maya's locker, falsify notes in her name, circulate a forged complaint to the guidance office. There was even one message that read, "Keep the heat low. She breaks easy." Principal Harmon took it straight to the school board. But here's where it got murky. The board sat on it. See, Elwood Grant was tight with the superintendent. A fishing buddy. A donor. They tried to smother it. Boys will be boys. Misunderstood. Context. But 3 days later, the story broke anyway. Not in a newspaper. Not online. On the school auditorium screen. During the fall assembly, someone hacked the projector. There, in bold white font, were the screenshots. Message after message. Every student and teacher sat frozen. Gasps. Cries. Dead silence. When the screen finally went black, someone had added one last line. "Do you see her now?" The room erupted. Teachers scrambled. The projector cord was yanked, the curtains drawn, but it was too late. Phones had snapped photos. Students had already sent it across town. That evening, Sheriff Elwood didn't show up to dinner at the diner like he always did. And Carter? Suspended indefinitely. His college applications poisoned. Local parents demanded answers. Elwood tried to fight back, called it a targeted smear campaign. Said his boy was set up. But it didn't matter. Because someone had traced the screenshots. They came from Carter's phone. Sheriff Grant finished out his term, but he never ran again. These days, folks say he sits on his porch and watches the road like he's waiting for time to apologize. But time doesn't apologize. It just moves forward. I remember passing the Colton farm that week. Maya was on the porch with her father. She was laughing. Actually laughing. Her head tilted back, hand over her heart. And Mr. Colton? He just watched her with a look I'll never forget. Not pride, not satisfaction, but peace. Like a man who had finally done the one thing the world told him he could never do. Protect his daughter. But there was still one piece of the puzzle left. Because even now, even after all the reputations had cracked and the masks had slipped, there was one name no one dared to touch. The one pulling strings in the dark. In Sugarfield, the church wasn't just a building. It was the building. Stood right in the heart of town like a whitewashed sentinel for spires reaching into the sky, a bell that rang every Sunday morning whether folks were listening or not. For most people, that steeple was the moral compass of the community. And the man behind the pulpit? Reverend Caleb Moore. Silvery hair, pressed suit, voice smooth as creek water. When he preached, even the air seemed to hush. Folks swore he could talk a storm into silence. His family had held that post for 3 generations. His sermons were about decency, discipline, and divine order. He called the town his flock, and they called him untouchable. His son, Elijah Moore, was a different story. Sharp-featured, magnetic, and just cruel enough to make it charming, at least to the ones who didn't see the trail of damage he left behind. Elijah was the kind of boy who could say something venomous with a smile and have people thank him for it. He didn't bully Maya the way the others did, not out loud. No, he was smarter. Meaner. He was the architect of her isolation. Told people she was cursed. That her mama had died young because the Coltons were touched by something unclean. Started rumors that Maya hexed her classmates. That's why test scores dropped. Why someone's car broke down. He fed the fire with grins and Sunday handshakes. And the town believed him. Because he was the preacher's boy. You'd think a place of faith would stand up for the quiet girl on the edge of town. But when the whispers got loud enough, even God seemed to fall silent. Until someone started speaking on Maya's behalf. Not with words. With proof. It began the night before Easter Sunday. Flyers showed up on every pew. No one saw who left them. Folded into the hymn books, tucked under cushions, slipped into the prayer box. Printed clean. No fingerprints. No return address. Title, The Hidden Shepherd. Inside, a timeline. Dates. Photos. Text messages. Bank statements. And a letter. A letter Elijah had written to a girl 2 towns over, a girl just 16, who'd transferred schools the year before without warning. In the letter, Elijah apologized for how things ended. Said he couldn't risk the truth getting out. Mentioned his father handling it, so she wouldn't be a problem. Attached was a scan of a church ledger. A fund labeled Discretionary Outreach with 4 withdrawals. Same month. Same amount. All in cash. It wasn't just a scandal. It was a cover-up. That Easter morning, the church was full, but the Reverend was nowhere to be seen. His wife sat alone in the front pew, hands clasped so tight her knuckles bled white. Elijah? Gone. He withdrew from school that week. Rumors said the Reverend stepped down voluntarily. Others said the state gave him the choice. But the pulpit's been quiet ever since. No more booming sermons. No more polished smiles. Just silence. And Mr. Colton? Never once took credit. Never even stepped foot in that church again. But when the town gathered outside, reading the flyers, whispering to each other with pale faces and wide eyes, I swear I saw him standing at the edge of the woods. Watching. Not with satisfaction. With resolve. Maya started walking to school without her hoodie up after that. Head high. Shoulders back. Like she'd remembered the shape of her own spine. And the rest of us? We started remembering how long we'd been silent. But this story, this reckoning, wasn't over. Because one morning, I found something taped to my front door. A manila envelope. Inside, a note. You've been watching. You've seen enough. Now it's time to choose. Below it, a list of names. Some of them I knew. Some of them I loved. And at the bottom, one final name. It was early April when that envelope showed up on my door. Morning mist still clung to the fields, sun not quite brave enough to break through. The paper was cool in my hands, but the weight of it, heavy. Not just from what it carried, but what it meant. It meant I wasn't just a bystander anymore. Inside was a list. Names typed neatly in a single column. At first, they looked random, some familiar, some forgotten. But I knew better. I read each name twice, then a third time. By the fourth, my hands started shaking. Because these weren't just townsfolk. These were people who'd stayed silent. People who'd seen Maya pushed, mocked, erased, and said nothing. Teachers, board members, PTA leaders, Even a few students who'd shared a classroom with her smiled in her direction, then laughed behind her back. And at the bottom of that list, set apart by a line of space and a bold font, was a single name that made my chest hollow out. Maya Colton. And next to it, 2 words in italics. Not forgotten. There was no threat, no demand, just quiet, searing truth. She had spoken, not with a voice, but with precision, with records, with memory, the kind that doesn't fade, even when the world pretends it never happened. I sat with that envelope for hours. Didn't leave the house. Didn't turn on the TV. Just sat, staring at that final name. I couldn't tell if it was a signature or a monument. Then, around dusk, I heard tires on gravel. It was the Colton truck. Not the old one, the quiet silver Dodge that Mr. Colton drove when he didn't want to be seen. It pulled up slow, like it had all the time in the world. The window rolled down, and there he was, Mr. Colton, still in that same army jacket, still with eyes like quiet fire. He didn't say hello, just looked at me for a long moment, then said, "You've watched long enough. Now it's time to decide what kind of man you are." That was all. He drove off before I could answer. That night, I couldn't sleep. Not because of fear, but because of shame. I had watched the town unravel. I had known, maybe not all the details, but enough to know that silence was a kind of cruelty too. And then I remembered something. Something small. The day after the projector incident, the one that exposed Carter Grant, I saw Maya walking down Main Street. Alone, as usual. But in her hand, she carried a notebook. Leather-bound. Worn at the edges. I'd seen it before. She'd always had it. Clutched to her chest like armor. I thought it was just for drawings. Maybe poems. But I was wrong. That notebook? It was everything. She'd written it all. Every rumor. Every name. Every moment where someone looked away instead of stepping forward. Timestamps. Dates. Even little sketches, seating charts, locker numbers, passing periods. She'd built a record the school wouldn't. And she'd hidden it well. But someone found it. Someone who knew how to use it. And that's when I understood. This wasn't just Mr. Colton's doing. This was Maya's justice. Quiet. Complete. Undeniable. The girl they had erased had carved her truth into permanence. Her silence hadn't been surrender, it had been strategy. And her father? He had simply carried the torch she lit. They didn't just unmask the bullies. They exposed the system that protected them. Brick by brick. Secret by secret. And now, I had a choice to make. Burn the envelope. Or become the next pair of hands to carry the truth. I kept the envelope. Didn't hide it. Didn't burn it. I laid it right on my kitchen table, beside the coffee pot and unpaid bills, like it belonged there. Because in a way, it did. Truth's funny like that. Once it enters your home, it lingers. It stains the air. A few days later, I found myself walking the edge of the Colton property. I don't know what I expected. Maybe to see Maya. Maybe to apologize. Maybe to confess all the moments I'd stayed silent when I should have stood up. Instead, I found Mr. Colton sitting in a lawn chair by the tree line. His gaze wasn't on me, it was fixed on the field. The way a man looks when he's counting things only he can see. I cleared my throat. He didn't turn. "You think it's done?" I asked. His jaw tightened, just a little. "You don't stop rot," he said quietly. "You cut it out. Then you wait and see what grows back." I sat beside him. Didn't speak for a while. Just watched the wind move through the corn, that dry music of stalks whispering in each other's ears. Then I said the one thing I'd carried too long. "I saw her. I just didn't want the trouble of seeing everything." He nodded once. That was enough. We didn't need more. Because bearing witness isn't about rescuing. It's about remembering. That afternoon, he handed me a small, weathered notebook. Not Maya's original. A copy. Pages reprinted and bound with string. "Give it to someone who'll need it more than you," he said. Someone who still believes no one sees them. I took it with both hands. And for the first time since all this began, I felt something shift inside me, not guilt, not shame. Purpose. Maya had written herself into history. And now it was my job to keep that story alive. Because there's power in a name spoken. Power in a truth passed down. And power in making sure the next girl like her never feels alone again. That was the day I became a witness. And that's why I'm telling you all this now. Because the story isn't about revenge. It's about reclamation. But there's still one last thing you need to know. About Maya. Where she went. Who she became. Because, my friend, she didn't just survive. She rose. The last time I saw Maya Colton in person, she was leaving town. Graduation day. She wore her robe like armor, her head held high. No medals around her neck, no applause when her name was called, but her walk? That walk said everything. The whispers were gone now. No one dared speak on her like before. She didn't look back once. She didn't need to. Mr. Colton stood at the back of the auditorium, leaning against the wall, arms crossed. He didn't clap, didn't cheer. He just watched her walk across that stage like it was sacred ground. After that, she vanished from town life. Moved upstate, folks said. Got into a college on scholarship. Studied sociology and archival research. Built a life centered around stories, truth, and the people who lived in the margins. She started an anonymous blog years later. I recognized her words instantly. It was a collection of untold stories, quiet ones. Black girls from small towns, rural counties, school districts where their names were whispered only when convenient. Girls who had been overlooked, underestimated, misnamed. But Maya named them. She archived them. She gave them back their place in the light. The blog grew. Then it became a project. Then a foundation. She called it the garden. Because as she wrote in the first entry, when the world tried to bury me, it forgot I was a seed. I never told her, but I visit this site often. Still do. And I tell her story every chance I get. At church, when someone says, that girl was always so quiet. At the gas station, when folks pretend the town's always been good. At school board meetings, when silence tries to settle in again like dust on an old shelf. No, I don't let this story fade. Because in that quiet war Maya and her father fought, something bloomed. Not hatred, not fear, but courage, the kind passed down like seeds through careful hands. So, if you're reading this now, understand. She wasn't erased. She documented. She endured. And now, thanks to her, more of us are planting truth in the cracks. If this story hit you like it hit me, maybe it's time to start talking about it. These stories matter. And if you want more like this, stick around, we've got more coming.